I think it is actually the right thing to do now, that if you're ever building a command line interface tool, you want to build it so it can be used by humans and also by agents.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Krieger here at Anthropic. I work on Anthropic Labs. I'm really excited for our conversation today. I'm joined by Hugo Barra and David Singleton from Dreamer. I think it's going to be a great chat all about agents, building on the Agents SDK, getting a company started today, building on the exponential. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. I'm especially excited about this conversation, one, because I've known these both for a while, and it's been really fun to see them build and see what emerged from all of their kind of startup process. But also because I think it's just a very interesting moment where I think you're starting to finally see the promise of agents come real. And I think with their product, it'll accelerate that even further in terms of actually connecting it to what is personal to you, to what's meaningful to you, to actually helping you get work done throughout the day. And so I think it's a particularly timely conversation. But maybe just as a start, how did you both meet? I'm always really interested in co-founder meeting stories.
Hugo and I met a long time ago, back in London, in the 18 years ago. When we worked on mobile apps at Google before Android. So this was the very early days of mobile. I'd worked at a place called Symbian before, building smartphone operating system software before smartphones were a thing. And we got the chance to work on honestly everything. I started the Google Search app. We worked on Google Maps for mobile, Gmail, all of the apps. And it was a really special time because we were actually just like today's exponential, but maybe a little slower. Everything was going in that direction. But a lot of things had to be invented. We had to figure out the right UI paradigms, the right security models, and so forth. And then, of course, we both got involved in early Android. And maybe Hugo can pick it up from there.
Yeah. So a long time ago, maybe we should stop counting. 18 years does sound like a lot. So we worked on mobile for a while at Google. I then went on to the Android team, worked in product over there, was there for a few years, then went to the other side of the Android ecosystem, worked on consumer hardware at Xiaomi in China, ended up doing virtual reality at Meta, and then eventually started this with David. And it's really interesting that I like to remember the fact that when we were like in 2010, which I consider like the sort of the dividing, sort of element between the last computing era and this one, we weren't like thinking, geez, we are living that, transition right now. It was a few years later that we went back to look at it and say, wow, that was the time when that page turned. And I think a few years from now, we're going to be thinking like, right about now was when that page turned, and we'll know what it is that caused that page to turn. And we'll talk about that a lot today, I'm sure.
I think that timing aspect is really interesting. And I remember when we were building Instagram and the iPhone 3GS was the phone that was like state of the art at the time. And we couldn't have seen exactly what the iPhone 4 would have been, but you started to draw the lines. Well, the first one had a terrible camera. The next one had a better camera. Right? Where is this going? And can we map it and time it correctly?
And then GPS and App Store, and then things exploded.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, let's get into it. So maybe let's kick it off with what is Dreamer, and maybe show us a little bit about what you all have built.
Yeah, so Dreamer is a place where anyone can discover, build, and enjoy AI agents and agentic apps. And let me show you. So this is my Dreamer home. Everyone's looks different. And this is a platform where you can do a lot of serious business. So, I have my my calendar hero agent right here in the middle. It helps me prepare for meetings, make sure I know everything I need to know. But I also have my little fun corner up here. So, there's a magic picture of my dog Otis. This is my favorite watch.
I'm a shared lover of the F91W Casio as well. So
it's a classic.
And then whatever that below thing.
Oh yeah, this is a Tamagotchi, but it's kind of a personal productivity Tamagotchi. Unfortunately, right now it's a little sad. So I aspire to stay on top of my inbox. So if I click through here, let's take a look. This pet was called Tama. It lived healthily for 0 days because to keep this pet healthy, I have to respond to all the emails that I label in my own inbox with to respond. And if I don't stay on top of them, then it goes back in its lifespan. And this one, I've been a little busy with this stuff recently. So hopefully it'll pick it up again soon.
Nice. This is one you built?
It is one I built. So at the center of Dreamer is the Sidekick, this little friend over here. And Sidekick understands how all the agents in the system work. It also understands all the tools that I've got connected to the system. So I can use Sidekick to do anything, but in particular, I can use Sidekick to build agentic apps like this one. And so I just said, I want a Tamagotchi that stays alive if I stay on top of my email. I told it, this is the label I care about. And our Sidekick in coding agent mode built this whole experience.
Amazing.
And of course, I can then publish that into our gallery, and other people can install it if they also want to be shamed into staying on top of their email.
And then when they install it, they can configure it and customize it to their
That's
own.
right.
Yeah.
They could change what it looks like. They could change the goal that you have. Maybe you want to stay on top of exercise instead of your email.
Yeah. I think this also illustrates this interesting moment where, yes, you can create apps from scratch now using Claude, but actually then integrating it into these other systems, I think, is where the difference actually happens. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about how these things all actually connect to each other.
Yeah, let's take a look. So here's our gallery, which is where you can see agents and agentic apps that have been built by the community. There's often stuff here that you can just pick up and use right away, but anything on the system, you can remix it with the coding agent to make it work just the way you want it to. But right at the bottom layer of the system are these AI tools. So we've partnered with a bunch of different companies to have high quality tools available as the base layer of the system that all the agents can use. You know better than anyone else, I think. Any AI system is only as good as the quality of the data that it can access and pull in, and the quality of action that it can take on your behalf. And that's where these tools come in. So, this is real Google search. These are actual data feeds. We're not scraping this off the web. It's a very premium data feed of information from NFL. There's some premium tools here from other companies that we really enjoy working with, like Parallel for agentic web research. And you can compose these. The Sidekick will help you compose these to make the experiences that really work for you.
Being the non-mathematician at Anthropic, there are many much smarter researchers here. I get to be the product and labs person. My equation that is vastly simplified is success in AI is quality of the model, quality of the prompting and how you scaffold it, and then finally what it actually has context and access to. And I think solving that actually the middle two, because you might not necessarily know exactly how to start, how would you, set up an agentic system. And so having, in this case, Sidekick and the Agent SDK power your actual applications, and effectively it knows how to build those apps. So you just have to really tell it what the end goal is.
That's right, exactly that. Maybe Hugo can show us what's on his dashboard.
So this is my dashboard. It looks completely different from David's. A lot of my daily driver stuff sits here. Similar to David, I have my calendar here. This is an agentic agentic app called Calendar here, which is awesome. You should try it out. I've got my living portraits for wizards here. I'm looking at my wife in a second. I'll be looking at you. My Caltrain schedule, my news here, which is very agentic as well. It generates summaries for me, podcast style summaries.
This has become, by the way, how I consume tech news. It's been great.
It's awesome, right? Powered by TechMeme, and it's really awesome. It's the only source I use. I have a whole bunch of podcast things here. I have an agent that I wrote called Podcast Condenser, which creates highlights of podcasts with the actual person, not a summary. A kids story book creator that's very personalized, which I'll show you later. Some stuff about food. So there's just a lot here, and it's where I spend most of my day.
Where do you find, what is the first couple of agents do you find people gravitate towards or even create themselves?
So this is actually something that we've invested a lot of energy into. So Sidekick really is your companion for this. So when folks onboard to the platform, they actually have a conversation with the Sidekick, and Sidekick will start to get to know you. It'll ask you what you're interested in. And for instance, for me, I'm a busy person. I have a couple kids. I like to spend a lot of time with the kids. So the first thing that Sidekick encouraged me to build was something to explore what we could do in San Francisco every weekend together as a family. And that's actually a pretty common one. We see that adds a lot of value for folks. But if you tell it about the kind of things that are on your mind at work, it'll start to figure out how to connect to your calendar in order to pull the right stuff together for you. So it is very personal. And the Sidekick actually helps on that journey. We're certainly seeing a ton of personal productivity. We're also seeing a lot of sports. Folks love to follow their favorite sports team, and you can go really deep into all the micro data that you like to pull out. And you're an F1 fan. Yes. Have you tried the?
Yeah, I have the F1. Yeah, and it's got a countdown towards the first race. Which teams am I going to track? And I'm like, all right, I can't wait for the first race to start so I can actually.
Fun fact: that agentic app, I think it's called Pitwall, was built by someone who was in our alpha community, so a builder. And they loved it so much that they joined the company. So it's been a lot of fun.
It is interesting. I mean, the classic, 90% of people consume, 9%, are going to be kind of creating, and then maybe 1% are the, deepest, curators, et cetera. How do you all think about the sort of shift between who creates, who consumes, what the role of that is?
Yeah. So at the beginning, we had this idea of building an operating system for AI agents. That was what our sort of launch tweet said in November 2024. That said, we had a pretty different, I think, view of the world when we started the company, which is that we were going to have, developers building agentic apps and like really spending a lot of time making them work well. We were going to have this, operating system with a system agent and so on and so forth, and then consumers on the other side as users of these agentic apps, kind of like in a similar way as we have these marketplaces today. And as it turns out, one of the things that really changed substantially was realizing that consumers were themselves going to be the developers in almost all cases. There's still a very important role for professional developers in our world, which we can talk about later. It's around building AI tools. Builders, people who are just naturally crafty and have ideas and just want to build things, who are not technical, end up being the primary source of kind of juice and energy in this community. And that was a big change.
So we genuinely expected that most people would dip into the gallery, they grab the stuff that they want, and then they would enjoy it. And you can do that. But what we see is that almost everyone who starts using Dreamer doesn't just stop there. They'll actually build their own agents, and they'll especially remix the ones that folks have already made in order to work for them. So, right here on my dashboard, for instance, there is this agentic app, which was made by someone who doesn't work at the company, part of our early alpha. And this is an amazing agent for following your favorite basketball team. And I like it. I like the Warriors, so I'm super happy. But my kids, they're not into basketball at all. They love English Premier League soccer. So check this out. This agentic app right here, I made simply by taking this one and saying remix it. And I gave it the instructions, make this work for English Premier League soccer. And it made this agent instead. So a lot of folks are actually finding that this is a place that they can unlock their creativity. And I think that's actually a very important, profound shift in the world. So it used to be that building powerful experiences was something that was it required software engineers. If you want to build powerful software experiences, you have to get a CS degree or go do a boot camp or whatever. And so there are a lot of folks that have had creativity locked up in themselves for years and no outlet. And now the barrier to entry, the barrier to create meaningful experiences is completely different. And that's a lot of why we started Dreamer in the first place, because we could see that trend and we wanted to have a place where everyone can actually unlock that creativity and build stuff that they're going to enjoy.
It's been a blast, even in the last couple of months, seeing that idea start to spread a bit more, and people seeing how you could, you take Claude Code, even non-technical people, and build something. And I think there's a real tipping point happening. But maybe one other thing that I think is interesting to touch on, you both have background in developer tools and helping people enable building, basically. How did you approach the development environment? I've seen both the sort of more simplified, just chat to get the app, and then there's a more full-featured builder with logs and databases. And how did you think about, and we also talk about, ceiling and threshold, right? What is the threshold that you have to be able to create an app, and then what's the ceiling of an app that you can create there?
I'd love to talk about our SDK, but before I do, Hugo is the most kind of power builder on our platform. In fact, almost every time I'm walking into anything with him, including this conversation today, he's putting the finishing touches on the next agent he's building. So why don't you talk a little bit about what building feels like on Dreamer, and then I'll talk more about the SDK.
Yeah, so we start on our platform with a very simple experience where you just tell Sidekick what you want to build, and it'll give you a card with a summary, like a mini PRD, and then you just say approve or modify, and then it just goes one-shots it and gives you the thing that it has come up with. But then as you get into it, which is where I am now, you now understand a lot about how the system works. So you want to get involved, right? You want to be consulted on some important decisions that the agent editor is going to make. So you end up building a relationship. I really feel like I have a relationship with our agent editor that is very similar to the relationship I have with Claude. Right? We understand each other. We have a history, and it remembers the types of things that I care about and want to have a specific opinion on. Right? Then this becomes just like a virtuous cycle, like a beautiful relationship. I feel like every agent is better than the previous one because we understand each other more profoundly.
Yeah. So one thing that's changed since you started from now is, well, one, Claude Code has emerged, but also the Claude Agent SDK is now out there. And maybe as a brief sort of story of the Claude Agent SDK, originally it was just the underpinning for Claude Code. And we kept hearing from people, you need to change the name of this thing because it's actually for much more than just code. And I would talk to startups that had built sort of agentic orchestration platforms, and then they would say, you know what, actually with the Agent SDK, once they realized it, they could actually delete most of that orchestration code because the Agent SDK itself was basically Claude at its best, orchestrating across tools, making tool calls, finding out trajectories. So I'd love to hear how that ended up playing out.
Well, we were one of those teams. Dreamer is a platform. We use all the state-of-the-art models, but there's a lot of Anthropic in here. And actually, the Agent SDK is something that we've really gone to town on. We built our own coding agent early on with all of our own kind of orchestration layer. And then we were using Claude Code inside the company, and we realized, this is pretty special. We could invest a tremendous amount of energy in this harness, or we could invest all of our energy in having a great gallery and having the right way for people to, actually lean into being able to build all this stuff. So we don't have to build our own harness. Why don't we try to use Claude Code? So we started using Claude Code before you even had an SDK, and then we used its SDK. And that allowed us to build this kind of really powerful agentic loop, and it definitely accelerated our development a lot. And I think we were one of those teams that was saying, hey, you can use this for a lot more. So there's a concept inside of Dreamer which is called sidekick tasks. So these are powerful sub-agents that can be kicked off by any other agent. They run in the context of the sidekick, so they have access to the user's memory and so forth, but still policed by the sidekick, so it ends up being safe as it comes back into the app. And that's entirely today powered by the Agent SDK. And what we found really fun, actually, is there's a lot that we've built in our platform that is part of our software development kit for professional developers if they want to use it that way. We actually ended up designing those tools so that they can be called and used just as well as a professional software engineer would use them by the Agent SDK. So the Agent SDK is using our Dreamer CLI tool inside of its environment in order to orchestrate all of these things. And that's been an interesting trend as well. So I think it is actually the right thing to do now, that if you're ever building a command line interface tool, you want to build it so it can be used by humans and also by agents. And a lot of the things that you need to do to have a great developer experience for everyone is have self-explanatory docs, reward infinite exploration. You make sure it's incredibly powerful, and this stuff all ends up being a great impedance match with the Agent SDK, and therefore you can do genuinely very powerful things on the platform because of that harness and our CLI actually working together.
Yeah, one of the people I work really closely with is Ben Mann, who's one of the co-founders here, and he started the labs team. And the other day I was like, Ben, I keep getting these command line arguments. And I was like, why are you still calling a command line yourself? Like Claude should be doing it. And it was like, I'm still, and I've been here a couple of years, and I'm like as Claude pilled as anybody, and I still find ways. He's like, yeah, if you're trying to monitor 3 Docker logs, why don't you have Claude monitor? Claude Code can do it in the background, and then it can tell you when something happened. I was like, there's still another level of fully embracing the agent.
I think there's another thing that we're also going to look back a few years from now, which for us became possible because of the Claude Agent SDK, this thing that we call a sidekick task. Think about this idea that software at runtime can spawn other pieces of software that are actually created and written at runtime. This roughly corresponds to software rewriting itself, right, as it's being used. And it does it differently every time. I think this is quite profound, and I expect that we're going to see this in a lot of places. And it's really thanks to you guys sort of seeding this idea in the world.
Yeah, I think one of the metaphors I often talk about is, there's the person you hire on day 1 and the person after 100 days and after 300 days. And one of the things that I think is about to get unlocked with things like agent skills, with things like self-modifying software, with things like agents and sub-agents getting spawned, is the idea that, it did it that way once. Maybe it's a morning briefing that you created, and then you gave it feedback, and now it incorporated that in its next run. And then basically it's the accumulation of, hundreds and hundreds of invocations over time and feedback that improves, such that if you lost it, you'd feel like you weren't just losing the endpoint, you would have lost that whole journey as well.
That's right. Every one of those things that you mentioned, Mike, is present in Dreamer. So the idea that the sidekick tasks get better over time. And we're really excited to make all of that stuff available to anyone who just wants to come in and talk to our sidekick about how to scratch their own itch. And then we're going to keep making sure that all of those, cutting edge techniques that are live in the industry are right in here in the basement and kind of making that all work for you.
I think one thing that's really interesting there too, you talk about that virtuous cycle. I've seen also even in the apps that you've built, how some can actually connect to each other with Sidekick as sort of this intermediary step that is kind of keeping data secure and private, but still letting you sort of build and compose apps so they don't just live as kind of standalones as well.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the most important things that, back to what we were saying earlier, that we look back at a few years from now, right? Is this idea of composable software, right? Is the idea that each piece of software on your platform, whatever that is aware that the other one exists, with the right security boundaries, which we should talk about. It's actually a very important topic. But the fact that there are no silos and that these things are aware of each other means that an agent can recruit another agent that is very good at doing a thing. For instance, you use Tech News Pro, which is this agent that I created for news. Like, there's a button there that sends that piece of news, if you're interested in diving deeper, to another agent that's specialized in taking you deep into a particular piece of news. And there's an amazing job at that. In fact, it was an agent that David
actually, can I show you that? Because I'm pretty excited about this. So take a look at my screen here. I don't know if you used Pocket.
Sure.
So I was one of, I think, the Pocket super fans out there. So for folks who are not familiar, Pocket is a little Chrome extension that lets you save any article you find on the web onto Pocket, and then you can read it later. Pocket sadly was unshipped from the world in the middle of last year. And I know there are other people who are fans of Pocket. So back in October last year, I was missing Pocket, and I built this agent, which is called Pocketable. So all the agentic apps and agents in Dreamer have triggers. These are reasons that they might start doing something for you. Like, they can see that you got a new email that matches a certain prompt. But one of the things is you can share stuff from the web. So we have a little Chrome extension here. You can send stuff to any agent. So for instance, I was looking at this piece about building in Sea Ranch, California. It looks really interesting. I do not have time to look at that right now. I'm a little bit busy with Mike here. So I'm going to add it to Pocketable. And then, it hops over into Pocketable. And there's now an agent actually reading that article and summarizing it in the background. So this is a version of Pocket that works even better than the original for me. And a little Easter egg.
One of my favorite,
So Robin Sloan wrote about this idea that apps could be home-cooked meals, things that one person builds for maybe their family or their friends. And he wrote this back in February 2020. This piece has actually really inspired me as we thought about what this platform should be. And so it's been really nice for me to start being able to make these home-cooked meals and use them on Dreamer and share them with other people.
Maybe to torture the metaphor a little bit, also have the recipes be out there so that if you also want to make that same home-cooked meal yourself, you've got some alteration.
I want to show you a journey that builds on this, which is really interesting. You're obviously familiar with Tech News Pro, which is this agent that we built, that I vibe coded. So this morning, I was getting off the train, and I saw a story that I thought was really interesting. It was a new report from Sensor Tower, which is right here, that talked about the mobile AI app market. I was like, I want to hear more about that. So I clicked on this button, and it saved it to Pocketable, meaning it sent it agent to Pocketable, which then created a longer, more profound summary of that for me, complete with a quick audio summary.
Welcome to today's Tech Brief. We've just crossed a major milestone in the mobile app economy.
So I really enjoyed this. So then I asked my sidekick to send the article, the original article from Tech News Pro, and the audio summary together to our team on Slack.
We all got it on Slack.
So this is what it sent on Slack. And it actually did a pretty good job and sent by my sidekick, right? So I never thought about this use case when I started to work on this new app, this news app. But things, again, because of this composability, things kind of just work. So I think this is like the way that someone like me likes to think about it. Like, things just kind of work because the system knows what the pieces are like.
I think the really key piece, an app can be a home cooked meal, like in my Hall of Fame articles. Another one is about agent native architectures that Dan Schipper wrote in the last couple of weeks, which really talks about how if you design and build your app such that the tools that an agent has access to are basically equivalent to what a human has access to, and using that software, it unlocks all sorts of emergent capabilities, which we absolutely see as we design and build our software and building on top of things like the Agent SDK, where the more of that is exposed to the agent, it's able to create trajectories you wouldn't have even thought of before.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, nobody would have thought to, all right, there's the tech thing, and then it goes into Pocket, and then there's the audio, combine the two of them in there. But I think in exposing the correct primitives, you get that emergent capability.
That's right. And when we talk about these agents being composable, we've built that right into the ground floor of every one of these agents. So they do expose their internals, the same things that the humans using them can use to the system. And the way that then this works, because of course you want them to work together, but you also don't want your data going between all the agents willy-nilly. So the way it works in Dreamer is that the coding agent will create these composable pieces of software. Then it's actually the sidekick that makes them work together. So sidekick is your trusted agent. It is a system agent that we've trained, and we've put a lot of energy into making sure it can ensure that the right things are happening. So as you ask agents to work together, the sidekick orchestrates that, and that is our security and privacy model. It's how software was always meant to be. So if you think about composability, think about the Unix command line, right? I bet we've all played around with the Unix command line over the years. For folks who haven't, you really should go and have some fun with that. But in Unix and Linux, every command, you can take its output and pipe it into the next command. So you're kind of orchestrating, from input through various transforms to get the thing that you want at the end. That's how software was meant to be. It was infinitely composable, and it was quite malleable how you could make things happen. And we kind of lost that as we went to both desktop operating systems and then the web, because each application was built in a silo. And now today, we're breaking down those silos again, and you can actually have stuff work together. And I think that's pretty exciting.
I think so too. And also kind of in terms of generations, there was that generation of recomposable web software that almost broke through, but I think was ultimately limited by they weren't rich enough. There was not enough actions that you could then take between different places as well. And it was also harder to build the software. That was in the hands of the very few versus being a prompt and some iteration away as well. You've been working on this for a couple of years. I'd love to hear, because this is something we think a lot about when we build products at Anthropic, where you start and where you go and how the capabilities shift from underneath you. So what did you see at the beginning? How much has that changed? And how did you set yourselves up to be able to continue to ride that exponential?
Yeah, I wrote this piece, which kind of blew up and went all over the internet in the middle of last year, called Coding Agents Have Crossed a Chasm. And that is really true. So we've been using Claude Code in particular inside the company for several months. And there was a week where I realized that more code had been produced at the company with Claude Code than with our fingers. And that was pretty profound. So that's a really good example of where I think to build in this environment where the models are advancing really quickly, all of the techniques are advancing really quickly, you have to be willing to constantly revisit your assumptions. So before building this company, I was at Stripe as CTO. I was very fortunate to have a front row seat to generative AI. We were, I think, building some agentic systems before even anyone knew to call it that. And that was a lot of the inspiration for starting the company. But something else we used to talk about there quite a lot was this concept of OODA loops. Have you heard of it?
Sure.
So it's a concept that came up in, I think, fighter pilots. It's the idea that you have observe, orient, decide, act. And the faster you can run that loop, the more successful you're going to be. This is just a moment in time where you need to do that, to the nth degree. And so we have been able to, I think, number one, not be too, you need to be humble enough to be willing to throw away anything you've already built if it turns out there's something better available in the market. And that has happened to us several times through the last year. It's also, I think, super valuable to be able to run a really tight loop with users, with the people who are actually going to get value out of these systems. And our company and our product, which we're going to launch into beta really soon, today, in fact, and we're excited to have folks come and enjoy, we really have built with community at the core. So we are obsessed with getting friction logs from our users, reports of things that they wish they could do that they can't do yet, and then acting on them. And this environment forces you to run a really tight OODA loop.
Yeah, every time I ping David with feedback, he's like, "Nope, I know exactly the engineer. The safe area insight will be fixed by tomorrow. We're gonna get this in." So it's that loop I think is really, really essential. It's, for example, why we shipped Claude Cowork the way we did. It was all right, this is ready enough to get some real life feedback, and in 2-3 weeks that it's been out, it's already been helping sort of feel that wheel of, okay, we've got feedback. We know what sucks about it. Let's go make it better. And that you only know that once it's out and hitting real content.
To that end, you've actually used the platform a little bit and you built some stuff. What have you built? What's been fun?
So for me, I think there's often things that get trapped in email and then don't go out. And that could be everything from, we have somebody who drops off meals a couple of times a week. And that's some email that I would, magically star. And then it would just get lost. And now I was like, all right, I want a Sidekick. Every time this comes in, make an agent out of it. Created this really beautiful composed sort of things. And the thing what's nice too is like, as soon as I onboard my wife onto there, we can have, that shared experience of like, this is what this looks like. Here's where it goes. And the other one is I get a lot of, newsletters, Substacks, Matt Levine's columns, etc. I really want to listen to them rather than read them. I have a drive every day in. And so one of the things that you guys came up with that was very clever is that everybody has their own personal podcast feed that you can add to in Overcast, Apple Podcasts, wherever. And I thought that was like finding new ways of delivering the outputs of the agents I think was a clever thing that you guys found, because now I have those newsletters just in audio form that I can just go listen to them on the way. And it doesn't rely on every single one of them having to come up with their own audio feed one by one. Casey Newton did for Platform, that's one, and they're not all going to do that. And so being able to sort of really quickly automate that was a really nice insight.
I also have really enjoyed this concept of time shifting. So I drive to work. That used to be dead time. I also walk my dog almost every day. I enjoy it. It's really nice to get out, but I'm not using that time super productively. So I built 2 agents literally by just telling the Sidekick I wanted them. One, which makes a podcast that goes into our Slack, the company Slack, every day, and gives me a summary of everything happening at the company that I listen to on the way to work. What a great way to arrive at work. You already know what's going on. And it also prepares me for meetings. And then I have the reverse, which is I can record a voice note when I'm walking my dog. And I just kind of ramble. I call it Ramble Wrangler. I ramble and say the things that I want. And then the system agent, the Dreamer Sidekick, actually processes that and turns it into a beautifully structured Google Doc that I usually send to Hugo.
Nice.
Do you want to build something?
Sure. What should we build? You know what we could do? I would love to show you what happens when you've built something and you don't quite like it. So here's Pocketable, and there is that commune design article that I put on here. But look, it got it a little bit wrong. So I think of this as a chill article. So Pocketable, one of the things I added was the ability to categorize stuff into think or chill. This one, I think certain people would think of this as a think, but this is for me as a chill. So sometimes it'll get things wrong. So what I would like to do is make it something I can control. So here's all I have to do. Make changes to Pocketable. So now the Sidekick is spinning up this environment. You can see what I've actually prompted before to get it to build this thing. And I can say something as simple as...
This is conceptually like a resume Claude session
absolutely.
Or agent session there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I could say something like, make the think chill label clickable. So it's toggle between them, and that's it. Just natural language English. That's what I speak. That's what the Sidekick speaks. Yeah. It's the professional software engineer that understands how to orchestrate everything to make that happen.
Well, I think it's interesting just on this screen. What's like as a you can prompt it and have that conversation, and then there is that sort of revealed additional sort of layers if you wanted to go and monitor the activity, see what the functions that it exposes are below as well.
That's right. We thought very hard about this because we want the platform to be super accessible for folks who've never built software before, and you can literally just describe things and they will get made, and you can say what you want to change and it will get changed. But if you want to take some steps up that ladder of complexity, for instance, you can pull up the prompts here and you can see the prompts that are being used behind the scenes. You can see exactly what's going on. Every one of our agentic apps has a database that's spun up on the fly for this user, so you can actually dig into the data that's there. And in fact, there's also a whole SDK. So you can take this out to code on your local machine if you want to. As it turns out, very few of our users do that anymore, including professional software engineers, because you can do everything right here by talking to the Sidekick. That concept of easy things should be easy and hard things should be possible is something that I've often talked about when building other developer platforms, and it becomes kind of even more important when building a product like this.
And it's like you can walk further up the complexity stack than you could before because of these agents, but there's still another layer that you can go deeper on as well.
Right.
I want to show you a quick example of how this stuff I think is going to start showing up in people's lives. With a friend of mine, I built an agent called Storytime. which is what you can see here. The desire here was we have 2 young kids. We love telling them stories. We want to tell them stories that are like for them, that make sense about their life, about the things that they're experienced, or the things that they have already are about to experience or have experienced. When I'm in here, I go to create a new story. I choose which kid I want to create a story for, and then after choosing my artistic style, I have 2 paths. I can create my own story, and this is kind of how kids' AI playbook or storybook things are done today, or I can have Sidekicks suggest a story for me. Sidekick will then create a Sidekick task, essentially create a new agent that will do research around what matters based on what we know in my email, in my WhatsApp, in my memory about the life of these kids. So for example, grandma is coming from Los Angeles tomorrow. Well, create a story about that. We have a baby sister coming in a couple weeks. Create a story about that. Our daughter went to Filoli to see the Christmas lights with one of her friends from school. Create a story about that, and so on and so forth. And this is just will be really present, I think, in people's lives. And it's so personalized. It's built around your life. And it's just wonderful.
I think what this really speaks to, I love that app. There's so much powerful intelligence in the models, and it deserves not to be trapped in a chat box. It needs to get out into all these surfaces that we can have really rich experiences on. And we're really excited to start to see people in the community building applications like this and then integrating them into their lives.
Yeah. It reminds me of our preschool really encourages making social stories, which so far I've made in PowerPoint. But this is a much richer way of here's how this is what's about to happen to you. Here's how you actually can sort of think about what that's going to be.
Have at it.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so, against this backdrop, we are launching Dreamer today. And if you are the kind of person that likes to think about ideas and figure out how to make them work for you, Dreamer's ready for you. Come in, tinker with agents and agentic apps, engage with the community, share your creations, remix others. We'd love to see what you're going to build.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining. I'm excited to see what you guys continue to build on top and together with us. And congratulations on the launch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you very much.